Thank you to the worship team today. Great job, as usual. Thanks for your work. Yeah. This morning I came in a little early just to kind of be here to get a sense of the worship service, and I was reminded of how much goes into this hour that we're together all throughout the week, whether it's preparing slides, whether it's making sure communion is all out, whether it's communicating what part does which part and who sings which part. And there's a lot that goes into our time together. So thank you to the worship team and to Jeremy as he leads that group, and to the tech team as well. I want to begin today by talking about transitions in life. And I go to Isaiah chapter 43 to begin with, and I'll come back to that. So if you want to just find it in your Bibles or on your phone, Isaiah chapter 43, and I'm just going to look at verses 18 and 19. Isaiah 43 is a great passage, by the way, if you just want to spend time in that all week reading, because there's so much in Isaiah 43. But I just want to grab those two verses of 18 and 19. And this is what Isaiah says. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness, and I'm making streams in the wasteland. So, who am I? For those of you who don't know, my name is Eric, and I'll be serving as the interim pastor here for the next, at least the next 3 months. My real job is called a regional pastor. And so what's a regional pastor do? Well, I work for Illinois Ministries of the Church of God, and you are a part of the Church of God. Yay, shout out. If you'd like to know more about the Church of God, you can go to jesusisthesubject.org, and that's our national website, and you can find out more about that. One of the many things that a regional pastor does is to work with churches that are in transitional times. That's one of the kind of the big things that I do. Currently, we have about six to seven churches, and some of those are full-time, some of those are part-time, that are currently looking for a pastor. So pastors that are searching for a new place to serve will usually contact the regional pastor. My region is the state of Illinois. So I go all the way down to almost Paducah, Kentucky, and all the way up. The farthest church northwest would be Freeport. So that's a long journey. So when I travel, I get paid by the miles. And so if Lisa and I are really short on income, I'll go visit Freeport and Paducah and be able to take her to Outback Steakhouse. But pastors when they search for a new church, they will contact regional pastors, and then we will help them find, if we have those positions, we'll help them find a place to serve. And we also will do deeper dives into reference checks, background checks. We help with the interview process. I will help with the elders on what are the best practices. Lots of things have changed in the last 15, 16 years in hiring someone as a pastor. And then I'm on call to help in any way. That's to any church. But because the elders have invited me to serve as the interim for these next 3 months, there'll be a little bit more that I can bring to the search process. There are a few Sundays that I'm already committed, and in other places, so there'll be a guest speaker here. So in a couple of weeks, I have Pastor Manny from Aurora Church. You helped lead that church in restarting. They're doing great, and I have asked Manny to just come and tell you the story of Restoration Church, particularly their emphasis in discipleship. And so if some of you don't know, when I first met Manny, he had just come out of a gang in Chicago and had just come out of prison. I knew him before he met Jesus, and he was a pretty rough dude. And so now I know him as a pastor who's been pastoring there for quite a while, almost 15, 16 years. And so you don't want to miss that Sunday. He'll share his testimony and a little bit about what's happened at Restoration Church in Aurora. And the reason that's happened is because part of it is because this church partnered with Pastor Manny. Illinois Ministries partnered with Pastor Manny. And so the two of us, Illinois Ministries and Water's Edge, was able to help him get started. And I think Pastor Jared and Kevin went up a lot to help get all their systems set up. Pastor Jared served on their board as their chairman. I was on their board as well. Pastor Jared missed a meeting, and so I elected him chairman, so don't miss meetings. But he did a great job serving as a mentor and as a chairman of the board. So he'll be here in a couple of weeks. August, do you remember which one? August 11th? Yeah. And so when I'm gone, I will let you know who's coming and who will be speaking, and so you have an idea of what's happening. We will also, the elders have also engaged an organization called Next Step Church Services. They're kind of a parent company to what you might have heard called TIPS, T-I-P-S. It's Transitional Interim Pastor Services. They're Transitional Interim Pastor Services. And TIPS will come in, and they will do an assessment. And this weekend is September 6th and 7th. That's a Saturday and a Sunday, so TIPS will be here September 6th and 7th. On September 6th, there'll be a lot of pre-work before the assessment, so there'll be some surveys that go out. There'll be some initial interviews. If some of you are gone that weekend, we might even do a couple of interviews before that. So Saturday will be a long day of them coming and doing interviews. And then Sunday, they'll be here, but they're just going to kind of observe. I think there's maybe one or two people that'll be here. So they won't be doing anything up front, but they assess everything. I happen to have served on their board for a couple of years. This is an organization that serves the Wesleyan Church, the Nazarenes, the Church of God. There's several. The Christian Church has just signed on, so there's several places that they work, and so currently they're serving in about three or four of our churches right now in Illinois. It's a great organization, and then when they finish the assessment, they will come and they'll stand up here on a weeknight or a Saturday or Sunday or something like that, and they'll talk about what they have discovered in the assessment, and then from there, we'll put together a transitional team and begin working on some of the things that they have suggested. Here's the whole idea of TIPS, and Pastor Ray knows this. The idea of TIPS is that the congregation thrives during the interim time, not just survive. And so when you see the amount of data that comes in from demographics to the assessments to natural church development as they use. Years ago, Ray served as one of my coaches as we were starting to do some assessments years ago. And so they'll do part of that. It's a huge assessment, and it's so very helpful for not only for us, but for the next pastor who comes in. So Pastor Jared is going to Eastland Church of God in Lexington, Kentucky, and they just finished with the TIPS pastor, and so he'll have this big report that says this is what we have found about the church. This is what's concerning. This is what is good. This is what's healthy, because it's all about working in that church health. With that assessment, I'll begin working with a transitional team on what are some of the immediate concerns, and we'll press on. What about after 90 days, though? Because the elders have said, Eric, will you walk with us for the first 90 days? What comes after that? And this is where we are with the elders and myself and my wife. If everything is going well, and I am managing both my full-time job and doing the interim pastor here, and the church is responding to me serving as the interim, right? Because this is my home church, and so if me being here as an interim is not being received, I don't want to do that, because I have to live with you. I mean, you have to live with me when I finish, right? So because hopefully in a time period, I'm going to be back sitting back there and sitting next to Brian, and so I want that to be good. So if everything is going well, the elders can ask me, or they could ask me to continue. Usually interims will go for about 3 months at a time. And so we'll agree. Now, I want you to know also that at any time a name comes across my desk or a phone call, the interim process can be stopped. So you're not like, I haven't signed a contract and like, you don't owe me 90 days. It means if there's a resume that comes across, then I'm going to take that and I'm going to submit it to the elders and say, we can't let this one go. Okay? And so that's all in the works too. So they could choose to extend my time. They also could choose to bring in a trained TIPS pastor, which is the organization that's doing the assessments. And that TIPS pastor could come. Usually that's a 9-month interview or time period, but that can be adjusted as well. So in the next time period, it'll either be me serving, it'll be a TIPS pastor, which is a trained interim pastor that knows what they're doing, and they've done this many times before. And there's some other options, but I think those are the two options that the elders feel the best at. Why am I telling you this and not one of the elders? Because the elders are gone today. They just have left the building. No, Kevin is running something back there. Kayla's downstairs, and Eric and Vince are out of town. Vince is with his family dealing with some medical stuff with Sandy's mom. We need to be praying for that family. But and Eric, I don't know. Eric, is he vacation? Yeah, vacation. He's crying because I'm here and Jared's not, I guess. I don't know. But he's there. So I'm going to do my best during this transitional time to make this period a time of renewal, refined direction, and clarification of why you exist. My ultimate goal as serving as an interim pastor, no matter how long I do this, would be to hand off the leadership and your vision to your next pastor, who will also be my pastor. So this is an important time that we have to clarify why you exist, and we have to come to talk about what some of and that's why we're going with that assessment, because that assessment will be you telling us what you think. It's not going to be us telling you what the vision is. It's not going to be us telling you what's wrong or what's right. It's going to be you telling them, and they're just going to look at it like this. It's like going to the doctor and they're going to take your blood. And then you're going to come in, and the doctor's going to say, like to me, he said, boy, Eric, your cholesterol's still a little bit too high. See, I can't blame him for that. I told him that when he took my blood. Eric, your diabetes is out of control. I can't blame the doctor for that, right? It's my fault. And so, when the doctor says you need to eat less French fries, I can either find a new doctor, or I can get on the right medicine that will help make me healthier. And so part of the interim period will be looking at all of that based upon from what you have told us, and then we'll go from there. So let's talk about transitions. Life is full of transitions, and you know that. Whether it's in the church or whether it's in your home or the transition of marriage. I just was talking to Don. He's getting ready to retire in September. A little jealous. But there's this, life is full of transitions. And depending on your personality and your experiences of life, all of us handle transitions differently. Some have a lot of anxiety during transitions. Like, oh, what's going to happen? Some are energized. Some are energized by transitions. Some people start looking for another boat to get in because they're afraid their boat's going to start sinking, and it hasn't even started sinking, but they're like, I'm getting out of this boat because it could. Some people are overcome with fear of what ifs. What if? While others will sit back and kind of take a wait and see. It's like, I'm not going to find another boat, but I'm not going to help row. I'm just going to kind of watch and see. We have transitions in jobs. How many of you ever had a new boss? Transitions. A new board that you're working with. You shift jobs. Or you're transferred somewhere and you have to start all over with new neighbors and with new grocery stores and new doctors, and those transitions can rock our world. Education, every year that goes by, our kids are transitioning to a new classroom. So our girls are older and we have grandkids now, but I remember when our girls were younger, it was a transition for us when their teachers shifted. Because some of the teachers we absolutely adored because they knew our kids and they got our kids, and then our kids might go into another classroom and it was totally different. So that transition in education is coming. There's transitions in our homes that happen all the time. We're working right now, my family. My mom had a major medical complication. She's 88 years old, and she had an appendix burst 2 weeks ago. And she's still having some complications, but she can't go back to her independent living, and my mom is very independent. And so the transition for us to try to find where will she go and how will we transition that, it's been a challenge for my brother and my two sisters, and it's been crazy challenging for my mom. It's a transition. It's a transitional time, and what I'm finding is that in transitional times in life, if we allow God to be working and be present in it, He works through those transitions for us to have a fresh start. And so a transition time is a time for a fresh start. I want to go back to Isaiah chapter 43, and I want to talk a couple of things about the first two phrases. It says, first of all, forget the former things. Now, that doesn't mean that the former things don't matter. It doesn't mean that we are to forget the former things and forget, what's his name? No. Forget the former things doesn't mean that we will not honor those who have served. We're not going to forget that Pastor Jared and Kelly were our pastors. That's not what that means. I remember the church had an interim pastor after I left, and someone had come, and they were frustrated because people kept saying my name, and they kept talking about me, and he got up on a Sunday morning, some of you might remember this, and said, hey, you guys have to start thinking of Eric as dead. And my daughters were here. You remember that, Lisa? And my daughters were here, and they were like, he's not dead. You need to find a different church to be an interim pastor. But no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to pretend that we didn't have a great time and a good period of season with Pastor Jared and Kelly. They mattered. But we're not going to dwell on the former things. We're to forget them in the way that we're not going to hold on to them so tight that we can't move forward. And then it says, don't dwell on what we used to have. And that's talking about more of the emotions, like the way it used to be. I noticed this when after I left here and transitioned to a new job, the longer I was gone, the better some of you thought I was a pastor. Right? Because you forgot some of the bad things, because not everything was perfect, not everything was great. But the longer you're gone, the more of a hero you are. And so, but anyway, then it says, Isaiah says, see, I am doing a new thing. Part of the economy of God, friends, part of the economy of God is fresh starts. Fresh starts. T.S. Eliot said, what we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we always start from. I want to say that again, especially for some of you wordsmiths out there. This is a great saying. T.S. Eliot, what we call the beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a new beginning. The end is where we always start from. In other words, with each new beginning we have, there are lots of emotions and there's lots of thoughts because we are ending something. And so some of you might have that, like, it's a fresh start because we just ended something. And some of you might be, this is a fresh start and I'm a little worried because we just ended something. So I get that. When Kayla, let me illustrate it like this. I wish Kayla was up here today. When Kayla and Cody were getting married, it was the wedding day. It was an outside wedding, gorgeous day. It was a little cold, but it was a little chilly. And it was an outside wedding. We were at the gazebo. All the wedding party had arrived. They were up front. Everybody was seated in the seats. Pastor Jared was at the gazebo where Kayla was going to walk down the aisle. Cody was there waiting for his bride. And Kayla asked me to play and record a song called Butterfly Kisses. Some of you may remember that, butterfly kisses all up in your hair, that kind of stuff. And so we're in the car because it was cold. And Kayla and I are in the car. The wedding is starting. All the music is starting. And Butterfly Kisses comes on. I look over to Kayla and I said, okay, babe, let's do this. And I start to open the door and she says, Dad, I don't know if I'm ready. And so I was like, okay, there's 3 verses, so we're still like going to little dances and her hair has little butterflies in it, and she's doing that. And so we get to the second verse and I say, okay, babe. She goes, I just need a minute. This is like the last time that I'm just going to be by myself with you. And I'm like, okay, the third verse is coming. Third verse is, I walk me down the aisle, Daddy. Please don't cry. And I'm not. I'm not crying. I'm like, honey, you get out of the car. It's the third verse. The song's going to come to an end. And so I go ahead and get out of the car, and I walk around the car. And all the weddings, they're just looking back. They're thinking, this is so precious. And I'm like, no, it's not. I was like ready to call for Lisa. Say, get back here. Deal with this. You're the mom. And so I open her door, and she gets out. And then the verse comes on, walk me down the aisle, Daddy. And I'm walking her down the aisle, and they're singing Butterfly Kisses. And then it just clicked, and she was ready. I know. Oh, I thought it was going to be like a movie. Like we were going to drive off in a CRV, and oh my goodness. But she walked down and never regretted it. But that's the emotion that goes on during transitions. You don't always know what this next transition is going to be like. New beginnings have lots of emotions, and it's okay. It's okay. Pastor Jared said that last week. Hey, there's lots of emotions going on today. It's okay. It's in the in-between time. And this is what I would kind of call an in-between time. This is the time from like, we haven't gotten out of the car and we haven't started walking down the aisle until you say, I do. And there's lots of emotions that are happening. And I know that's where some of you are this morning, and it's okay. The Bible is full of major life decisions and transitions. You have Adam and Eve before sin, after sin. You have Moses. Moses went from a baby to royalty to a murderer to a shepherd of a leader to a shepherd, and then back to a leader of the nation. Paul was a good Jewish teacher and he hated Christians, and he transitions to a believer and he writes half of the New Testament. You have the disciples leaving everything behind to follow Jesus, being taught by Jesus, walking with Jesus, experiencing Jesus, loving Jesus, being rebuked by Jesus, being loved by Jesus, and then watching Jesus arrested, beaten, found guilty, knowing that he was innocent. They watched him crucified, they watched him die, and then the resurrection. Transitions. And a lot of those transitions were like in the last 3 or 4 days. It's crazy. Transitions bring a roller coaster of emotions. For the disciples, it rocked their world. So here's 2 things I want you to know about transitions. I'm almost done. The first thing, transitions can rock our world. No matter what transition it is. Transition of a pastor, transition physically, transition job-wise, transition from not having children to having children, transitioning to not being able to pay your bills, or to being able to pay your bills and filling up with gas in your car for $30 to transition to $55. I mean, transitions are always around us. Good transitions, bad transitions, because in every transition, we let go of some things and we test out new limits and different approaches. That's what the interim period is really for. That's why we're going to do the assessment. That's why I will on purpose try to do a few different things just to rock our world, because when a new pastor arrives, we need to be flexible. So there's some things that we're going to do that I'm just going to and I was telling the worship team today, I'm used to when we take communion, we come to the table. Okay? That's just me. It's not that every other pastor does it wrong and we are not going to do it this way, and maybe we will do it this way. I'm just trying to give you an example that we may come to the table instead of having it in our pews ahead of service. And you think, oh my goodness, what is that going to work? I want us to do that kind of stuff because we just need to flex change a little bit. Another thing that we'll do starting in August is we'll start gathering one night a month just for prayer. We'll just come together for prayer, and there will be a lot of emphasis in the weeks and the months ahead on different prayer things that we can do as a congregation. I was talking to Missy this week, and we may experiment with different kinds of life groups in the fall, because the life groups are where you as a church can best live out, we love and we grow. That's the best place that you can live that out. And really, ultimately, it would be great if that's where we serve comes out of, but that might be for the next person. But so transitions can rock our world, but listen, we forget the former things because God is doing a new thing. And usually interims are old, like me. And the reason is we've been through so many things that normally we're not going to come in and just like mess everything up. It can happen. I mean, for 20 years of my life, my spiritual gift was messing things up. Right? It felt like that. This church hired me when I was 23 years old, and I just thought my spiritual gift was just to make people mad. But transitions can, and so we're going to do some changes just to remember that we need to be flexible. The second thing I want you to know is transitions can tempt us to go off mission. If you remember the story in John 21, the disciples had been through the death, the burial, the crucifixion, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus. Now Jesus is not with them. They're sitting around and they don't know what to do, and they don't know if Jesus is coming back. They're confused. There's huge transition. And Peter said, does anybody know what Peter says? Let's go fishing. Let's go fishing. And that's interesting to me because he had left that life. And I'm thankful for this whole thing because we get to see Jesus when the disciples go back to fishing. We get to see Jesus interact with Peter. And this is when he says, Peter, do you love me? And he does this ultimate forgiveness and connection in front of the fire as he's making fish, which is they fished all night. They didn't catch anything, but Jesus is on the beach cooking fish. Like, that's kind of a cool thing. And so this whole idea that the disciples started to go off mission, they started to pursue a different thing because the transition was too much. And I understand that. Let me tell you about a transition that rocked my world and tempted me to go off mission. In 1993, in this church, in 1983, Joliet Christian School, which is now the Trinity up on Black Road, Joliet Christian School was starting to just begin. So they just had their, 30th year. And they were going to have, the school was going to start over at Grace. At that time, it was Grace Baptist. Today, it's Grace Bible Church. And their building wasn't going to be finished in time. Some of you know this story. And they were looking for a temporary place. They had about 60 students to start with. And so they came over here and they said, hey, can we look at your building? We need a fast, the time was coming. We want to start in September. I was thinking it's maybe March or April. And so I said, yeah, you can look at the building. And so they came in and they said, well, we'd have to do this and we'd have to do this. And we could make this work and that work. And they said, can we meet here? And I said, yeah, but one of the agreements was I had to serve on the board. That was one of their agreements and our agreements. So I started serving on a board along with another member of the church. And so we were serving on the board, and in my first board meeting, and I have some education in my background, and so they find out that I was gifted in administration. I had a love for education, had a little education in my background, and so they said, wow, we don't have an administrator yet. Would you consider being the administrator? And I said, well, let me think about it. We talked to the church. At the time, the church we were starting to grow, but it really hadn't taken off yet. And so they came back and they said yes. And so for the first year of the Christian school, I was the administrator for what is now known as Trinity. And the school had a really good year. We had great teachers, and the school started growing. And the board came to me probably about a year later, March or April, and they said, Eric, you've got to decide what you want to do. Do you want to be a principal? Do you want to be an administrator? Or do you want to be a pastor? Because you're not going to be, and the church was starting to grow a little bit during that time as well. And I love being a pastor. I love being a pastor. I didn't take this new assignment as a regional pastor because I was tired of being a pastor. I loved being a pastor. And I also love being a principal. I love being around the students. I didn't care for the parents as much, but and those of you who are teachers, you probably get that. But the parents were fine, but I really loved the teachers and I really loved the kids. And I was at a fork in the road. I was in it for a transition. I knew I had to do something. And so after some prayer and some just talking and thinking out loud, I thought that my green light was to remain here as the pastor. And so they went on, and I was fortunate enough to teach a couple of years just part-time in the afternoon. But the school went off, and wow, look at that place today. I mean, it's an amazing, high-quality education place. And after that also, the church turned a corner as well. And so that transition that I was in, the church, we started a before and after school care program here. We planted a church in Chicago. This church did. Out of that church came a leader, Manny, who's now pastoring Restoration. We planted a church in the Dominican Republic. That's Paul and Yvonne both went on that trip, and they weren't married at the time. And that's when they started to fall in love on that Dominican trip. So, ¿cómo está? Yep, and so this church became kind of a sending and a planting church. There was a young man that grew up in this church that is now pastoring in Harrisburg, Illinois, Troy Bennett. Troy was first mentored by Pastor Kevin at the time, and Troy's doing a great job. There's a young lady today that started attending this church during COVID, and she is going through ministerial credentials. She's about halfway through her credentialing process. That's Julie Rosa. And today, Julie is serving as a real minimal interim pastor down in Marseilles. That church is going through some real difficult transitions. And so she's down there, and she's doing a really fine job. All that didn't, now, and please hear me say this, all that didn't happen because I said no to the Christian school. That's not my point. My point is not saying, look at me, wow, that would be more arrogance than a politician. What I am saying is, do you see how important it is for a church to stay on mission? It's vital. We have to discover or rediscover why we exist and who we are. We have to stay with that. Next week, I'm going to begin a series of messages, and I'm going to capitalize on the we love, we grow, we serve. Because that is what has been communicated to you. Down the road, that might change. Interim pastors don't change that kind of stuff. And so I'm going to tap into the we love, we grow, we serve. And I'm going to define, what does it mean when we love God? What does it mean when we love each other? What does it mean when we love ourselves? So we'll talk about some emotional, healthy stuff. And then what does it mean when we grow our relationship with God? What does it mean when we grow our relationship with one another? What does it mean when we grow our relationship with ourselves? How do we understand ourselves? This is God's work. It's his story. It's his story. It's not our story. So we have to stay focused on why Water's Edge exists. This is a church that has been through many transitions before. You have an amazing history. Some of you may not know the history, but you have an amazing history. Pastor Jared was here for 11 years. Before me being here for 22, there was a guy by the name of Pastor Louis Kuyowski. Pastor Kuyowski was one of the best persons in the world. Not only was he super kind and gracious, but he set this up for a young pastor of 23 years old to come in to a congregation with, he was an amazing shepherd. This church is 60 years old, and for 45 years of that, you've had 3 pastors. That's unheard of. That is absolutely unheard of. And really, when this church first started, this church went through pastors like Kleenex boxes. I mean, they were transitioning all the time. And then along came Pastor K. And he brought stability. And the DNA of this church tells me it's really good. I mean, some of those people are not here, but the DNA of this church is still, it's good. It's good. And God is not finished. This church doesn't belong to me. It didn't belong to Jared. It doesn't belong to any pastor. This church doesn't exist to keep a pastor employed. You exist to glorify Jesus and make him known to others in the special way that God has equipped you. That's what you've done for 60 years, and that's what I'm going to help you remember during this interim time. We will stay on mission. My mission is to help you with your mission. My mission is not to get you to go back to when I was here. I want to be so clear about that. I am not standing in here to get you to go back anywhere. First of all, I'm a different person. I've been gone 16 years. So this, with Eric coming back, don't leave thinking, oh, I sure hope it goes back to. No, we can't do that. We're going to forget the former things. We got to forget that. And those days weren't as good as we remember them, right? So we're here to stay on mission. It's a fresh start. It's a fresh start because God is doing a new thing. Now, we talked about the transition that we collectively will go through as a church. But as I end today, I want to talk to you about a transition that you might be going through in life. All of what I said is still true. Transitions rock our world. Transitions can tempt us to go off mission. But I know some of you are going through some transitions that are difficult. Some of you are going through job transitions. Some of you are going through transitions of relationships. Some of you are going through transitions of loss. Some of you are going through there's always transitions that are going on. And I want to pray for you. Because maybe something in this message has stirred something about your own transition that you're going through. And I want you to know that God is on your side. If you've submitted your life to Christ, if you're walking with him, he is with you. He'll never leave you. He knew the transition was coming way ahead before you did. And I want you to leave here today knowing that Jesus is enough. He's all you need. He is all you need. That's all we need in this transition that we're going through as a church. Jesus is enough. It's all we need. And through the transition that you may be going through, Jesus is all you need. So would you bow your heads, close your eyes? I'm just wondering today if there's some of you that are going through such a transition, or maybe it's not even a transition that I mentioned, but it's a transition that you're going through that it's just kind of difficult right now. With your head bowed and your eyes closed, would you just slip up your hand and say, Eric, this whole transition thing is tough. Okay, thank you. Thank you. You can put your hands down once you raise them. Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Yep. Anybody else? Probably 6 or 7 of you that are just lots of transitions. I want to pray for you. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray for those who are going through changes and transitions in their life. You are the God who walks with us through every season. And Lord, we trust in your loving presence. For those who are facing uncertain paths and new beginnings, Lord, I pray for courage and for strength and for direction. I pray that they would know that you are with them and that you are all they need. May they feel your peace that surpasses their understanding. May they anchor their hearts to you amidst this change. Help us to embrace this time of transition as a season of growth and renewal in our faith. Remind us today that you have a plan for our life. And the most important thing we can do is to surrender to that plan, to allow you to be the author of our life. We lift up all those who are in the midst of change, especially to those who slipped up their hand. I just pray your presence upon them today. I pray for the students that are starting new schools or new classrooms and families that are moving and individuals beginning new jobs and anyone else navigating life's transitions. May they find strength in you, hope in your promise, and peace in your presence. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.